Hey everyone, we are just getting started here with marketing metrics part one. We got a bunch of people still coming in here, so uh, it's great to have all of you joining us today. I'm really excited about the content we have for you. This has been a series of webinars I've wanted to do for some time because I think it's really important that business owners know what their marketing metrics are and they're able to use them to get a much more efficient and effective marketing strategy in place. So again, if you've got questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. And this is being recorded, so we'll be able to get that out to you as well. So, welcome, Marketing Metrics Part 1, Understanding the Value of a Customer. And this is a big one, okay? The lifetime value of a customer. And it's really interesting when we work with quite a few businesses, and there seems to be this allure of cheap and easy, right? Everyone's looking for that cheap and easy way to get clients, and it's only human nature, right? You want the easiest path to get there, but in reality, it's not easy. It's not cheap. It's so competitive and it's so complex now. And I think one of the biggest mistakes an entrepreneur makes is just simply not appreciating and valuing the true value of getting and keeping a client. And I think if you actually knew the numbers about it, it would really change your mind about it and really make you appreciate and value just how valuable customers and clients are to your business. So when you make this mistake, right, you forgo a marketing campaign that's going to require a modest investment so that you can save some money. I hear it all the time, right? It's one of the first places people want to cut back. And you end up costing yourself a lot more because you're not doing any marketing. You're not bringing in any new customers, and those new customers that you're not bringing in would be bringing you in referrals as well. And ultimately, you're losing out on the income that could have been generated from a new client. Okay, so in reality, when you think you're saving money by not investing in marketing and advertising and not appreciating new clients, you're actually costing yourself quite a bit. And you get into this vicious cycle, right? The cycle of doom. So let's say, for instance, you've got a company and things are tight, so we're going to spend less in our marketing. And because of that, you get a little less leads, you get a little less income revenue coming in, so you make less, right? And because of that, well, we better cut back even more. So then you make even less, and it just keeps going until you're out of business, right? One of the last things you should cut back is on your marketing. And I don't say that as a salesman. I say that as just from a consultant standpoint, just from a trusted advisor standpoint. A client of mine a while back was looking to cut a lot of their expenses, and the first thing they wanted to do was cut us. And I said, look, we're the only person on that chart that's actually bringing in money, right? Your accountant costs you money, your lawyer costs you money, all of your equipment, everything, your insurance, it all costs you money. We're bringing you money, right? We're an investment that's paying you. So you've got to really change that mindset because you don't want to get caught in this cycle. So the $64,000 question, how much should you spend on your marketing, right? And very few, if any, business owners seem to know that answer and the correct answer, okay? And that answer, as much as you can, right? You want your competitors to think you're crazy. You want competitors to think that, you're losing your shorts, you're spending so much money, you're in every last, piece of marketing and advertising in your community. And the reason is, and we'll talk about this in a moment, is that if you know how much you can spend to acquire a new customer, it's probably a lot more than you think, and it's probably a lot more than any of your competitors think, and you can use that to your advantage. So spend as much as possible on marketing, um, as long as you're getting that positive ROI, right? And you want to also leverage different media and approach your prospects and clients from several angles. So you don't want to, just stick to one little thing. You want to do different types of media because there's a lot of synergy between different types of media, and things really just aren't mutually exclusive anymore. So make sure you've got, some different types of media. You're mixing it up because some people will respond more to offline, some will respond more to online. And so by using different media, you can kind of test out what's going to be most effective for your prospects that you're targeting. And finally, make your campaigns unique so they stand out. I can't tell you how much marketing I see out there, how many ads, how many brochures, how many business cards that are just plain awful, right? They're boring. You just kind of blend right in with everybody else. There's no differentiation. There's no uniqueness. There's no personality. There's no unique selling proposition. And so you've really got to do some things to make yourself stand out and become known in the community. And for whatever reason, people just don't want to, or they don't have the capacity to be more creative and to stand out. And I think you really have to, given how much noise is out there in the marketplace. So you must know how much a customer is worth, so you know how much you can spend to acquire that customer. And that's the key metric of all the metrics we're going to go through. This to me is the key metric, and you'll find out why in just a little bit. So calculating the lifetime customer value. So you take your revenue times the gross margin times the number of transactions. Okay. And you can go on Google, you can kind of look this up too and find some calculators and different things like that. But this is again, a very basic version of how you figure it out. And we're going to go even more simple. Okay. So let's just leave gross margins out of it, right? And let's assume you can spend 15% of your budget or your revenue on marketing. Okay. Which is a conservative number, right? And for example, okay, let's say an average customer, $100 a month, right? They spend $100 a month with you. So $100 times 12 transactions, that's $1,200 a year. Okay. If you're spending 15% of your revenue on marketing to obtain that customer, that means you can spend up to $180 per customer and still hit your budget targets. Okay. And that's only if they stick around for a year, right? If they stick around for several years, you can spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars. Okay. Just think about that for a second. Let that sit in. What makes this so important, okay, is that let's say you can spend $180 per customer, right? And let's say you spent $1,000 on advertising and you got one customer. Okay. Obviously that wasn't worth it because you can only spend 180 per customer. So you've got to know, when I do spend X amount on advertising, I've got to be able to get, X amount of customers out of that advertising. And I can give you kind of a personal example. Spoke I spoke to a large association last fall, and I added up all my time, all of my team's time, all of our expenses, costs, everything like that. And I knew, given our lifetime value and what we can spend per customer and those sorts of numbers, we had to get 3 new clients from this speaking engagement to make it worth the marketing effort. All right. And it was great because we could go in there knowing our goal, right? We need 3. Okay. And we ended up getting exactly that. And it turned out great. And if I didn't know that, right, I might have thought, oh, we only got 3. We should have got like 10 or 20, right? But I knew numbers wise, we had to hit 3 and we were good to go. And that's what we hit. So, another example of this is, I was talking to a person about a recent home expo, and we were running these numbers. And I said, what's the cost of your time, of driving, of all the materials, just of everything, right? And it came out to quite a bit, in the thousands. And I said, what is an average lifetime value of somebody you get from these expos? And we figured out they had to get 10 new clients from this 3-day expo to make it worth their while. And they were absolutely shocked. They thought 2 or 3 would be great, right? But when you know these numbers and you run these numbers, okay, it cannot lie. It gives you that target number you have to hit. And so now, in their mind, do you do that expo? If you need to hit 10 and you're only getting 3, can we cut back our investment in it? Or how can we get more customers so we can hit that 10? So how many of you are spending anywhere near what you should be to attract and keep your customers? That's the real question. In every market, there seems to be a dominant person, right? They're on TV, they're on radio, they're in all the print stuff, they're all over the internet. And a lot of the other companies are, we're much better than them. Their ads are crap. We can do a better job, da da da. But they're cleaning up because they know how much they can spend to acquire a new customer. And typically the person that can spend the most is going to win. Okay. So if you've got a plumber who knows and is willing to spend $250 a customer, right, and meet their budget goals, and you've got another guy who only is going to spend 50 or 100 because he thinks it's an expense, right? The guy who's spending the 250 is going to crush the guy who's only spending 100 long term, all things being equal with effectiveness. So that's why you want to be the person who spends the most to acquire a new customer. And that's why there's always those dominant players in the market, because they're willing and they can spend the most to acquire a new customer. So not spending enough, right? Very few businesses that I talk with are spending enough to attract and keep clients. And the ones like we just talked about that are investing just crush it, because they can get campaigns out the door while their competitors are sitting around, looking for those free and easy clients, just waiting for the referrals to come in, rather than going out there, investing in it, and getting new business. So, what time is it? Well, it's time to show more love than the competition. Okay. And that really comes down to, not only acquiring new customers, because that's what we've been talking about, but remember you're paying clients as well, right? Don't just show love for prospects. You got to do it for your current customers as well. And in reality, they have to be resold each time they interact with you in your business, right? And I like to think of it as, don't try go and milk the cows in your neighbor's barn. Milk the cows that are right in your barn, and really appreciate the value once you have those customers. And so you've got to make this mental shift. And there's a huge divide that I see in working with business owners, in that a lot of them see marketing as an expense, right? Right on the P&L, big glaring expense, and a lot of them see it as optional, right? So it's either a car payment or I do marketing. And that's just an awful way to look at it. You've got to shift from seeing it as an expense to an investment. And it's one of the few things that's going to bring you more business. Ultimately, the more you can invest in your marketing, the more stable and fast growing your business will be. And that's what we all want, right? And the competition, hopefully, will think you're crazy and that you've got tons of cash, you're just blowing through it, they don't know how you're doing it, and that's perfect. That's what you want. Okay? You want to be the crazy guy that's spending all this money and no one can figure out where it's coming from or why. And as long as your marketing is effective, you're just going to blow right by them. Okay? So ask yourself, do you know the lifetime value of your customers? Okay? Sit down and figure it out. And if yes, what are the assumptions you make to determine that number? You're assuming, how many times they purchase, you're assuming how much they spend on average, those sorts of things. And then what is the 30-day value of a customer? Because I understand, if you can spend $1,000 to get a new customer, but you don't see that money for years and years, it's very hard to, up front, it's very hard to spend all that money to acquire that customer when you don't see that return on the back end. So knowing what the 30-day value of a customer is helps you to determine, cash flow wise, if it's, how much you can really afford in that first little part of it to acquire that customer. So you don't get too spend spend easy and really burn through a lot of cash, and you're not going to see that money on the back end. So I'm going to talk about Starbucks real quick, and kind of what they've figured out. And so you can see here, and again, we went through a very simplified version of this, and it can get far, far more technical, and it does. But I just want to show you what, big businesses who have a lot of analytics, how they kind of figure things out. So they look at how much a customer spends per visit. So you can see, each of these different categories, how much they're spending. So on average, they spend $5.90. And how many times do they purchase in a week? 4.2. And then average customer value per week, right? And they have it here. So an average customer in a week is worth about $24.30 to them. Okay. So if we look at the lifetime value, right now, I cut out. They had all sorts of different, uh, calculations for this, but you take these three different formulas, the average amount. So the average lifetime value of a Starbucks customer, $14,099. So if we take our formula, right, our simplified formula, we know that if we're Starbucks, we can spend $2,114.85. Now, think about that. Would you ever imagine that a coffee place, a coffee shop, could spend over $2,000 to get a new customer, right? Uh, No, I don't think anybody would think that, right? But lifetime value, they know exactly how much they can spend, and because they do spend that amount, they become who they are, the biggest company on the block when it comes to coffee. So you can see that it's very eye opening. It's very telling when you figure out how much a client is truly worth to you and how much you can spend to acquire them. So, how do you maximize this lifetime value? And this is a really interesting insight as well. So, Starbucks, if you look at customers who are satisfied and very satisfied, right, it's 89% are satisfied or above. And what they found is a 5% increase in customer retention, okay, increases your profits 25 to 95%. Okay. And in that same study, they found that it's 6 to 7 times more expensive to gain a new customer than to retain a current one. And so, if you want to improve your profitability and the lifetime value of a client, you've got to increase your satisfaction rate and your retention rate. That's, there's a whole ton of other ways you can upsell, cross sell, downsell, and stuff, but you also have to look at customer satisfaction because the more people stay on board with you, the more and more profitable they become, and by quite a lot. Okay, so keep that in mind, that a big player in here, it's not just how much people spend, how often they spend, but how long are you retaining them and how satisfied are they with your service or your product. And that's going to really determine long term how profitable you are. So to recap everything, you've got to start with shifting your mindset to really view marketing as an investment, not an expense, and know the lifetime value of your customers and spend as much as you can within that budget to acquire them. Okay, don't be afraid to spend that money as long as it works with the numbers and it works with your budget, and continually work to increase the lifetime value. So work on client retention. Okay, work on upselling them into more expensive things or additional products, cross-selling them, reselling them, whatever you got to do to increase the dollar amount of the transaction, to increase the number of transactions, right? And increase the length that they stay with you is going to be key. Okay. So I hope that really helps. I think it's just such a critical part of knowing the marketing metrics, and that's the first one you've got to nail down, because it's always fascinating to me when I sit down with a business owner and we run this formula and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm spending nowhere near what I could, right, to get a new customer. And you're just slowing down your progress. You're slowing down your ability to grow your business. So let's see here if we got any questions. Um, so if your lifetime value is really low, um, that doesn't leave me a lot of options for marketing to get new customers, right? Um, Correct. Then you've got to work on. Well, there's a couple of things you can do there. So let's say like a flower shop, right? The lifetime value might be really low, so you've got to work on increasing that lifetime value if it's really low. Because if your lifetime value is only $50, right? You can only spend $7 to get a new customer. So I would work on increasing the transaction. So really the quickest way is just to raise your prices, right? And instantly the lifetime value will go up. So if you raise prices from $50 to $100, you can spend twice to to acquire that customer, twice the amount. So you could raise your prices. You could try and work on getting people to buy more things in that transaction. So if you're a florist, let's say you want to buy flowers, you can get them to buy maybe some other gifts, some candy, whatever it is. Increase that transaction value. That's another big way. That's why Starbucks has all that other stuff there that you can buy. Um, Another thing you can look at is getting people to buy more expensive versions. So let's say they're going to buy cheap cheap, I don't know, sunflowers, right? You can maybe try and talk them into, roses, right? So instead of 30, they're going to spend 50, right? So I would, if you have a really low lifetime value, you've got to start with looking at the client satisfaction rate, okay, and the client retention, and look at, are people leaving me too early, or am I not doing enough to keep people loyal to me? What is that satisfaction rate? So that's where I would start. Start with the satisfaction rate, okay, and make sure people are staying long enough with you. And the second thing then is looking at those ways to, maybe raising prices, increasing transaction value, increasing the number of transactions, doing whatever you can to just squeeze out everything you can from each customer and each transaction. And again, it's going to be a lot cheaper to hang on to the people you've already got, and as you hang on to them, that lifetime value is going to grow. um, so that's a great question, and it's tough when you've got a low lifetime value. It's very tough. So yes, this is being recorded, and you'll be able to see all the slides, audio, everything. We'll get this posted up on our website. We'll send it out in an email as well. So no worries about that. And also, if you want to sign up for the other marketing metrics, we've got every Wednesday at noon in the month of April. Next week, we're going to talk about um, three simple but unknown marketing formulas that are going to really make your campaigns more effective. And we're going to walk down the list. I think you're going to find it really interesting. And again, all these will be recorded. We'll get the replays out so you'll be able to go through and review them. And if you have any questions, you can certainly send them to us via email, give me a call, whatever it might be, and really figure out that lifetime value and spend as much as you can. Really make that investment and really drive growth in your business. So thank you everyone for being on the session today, and go sign up, bluffsidemarketing.com/webinar. You can go sign up for the other marketing metrics, and we will see you here next week.